It lays the predicate and the foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Has the final battle now been successfully instigated, and coincidentally only days before potential negotiations that could have diffused the situation? Just bad luck, or all a part of the plan? Ultimately, a battle for maintaining total hegemonic control of dwindling resources on a rapidly dying planet. Breaking bad news headlines in a moment. First, please forgive my rant. So many times, over so many years on this broadcast and others, I've desperately tried to make clear that when unfolding and accelerating biosphere collapse becomes impossible to hide, and the masses begin to awaken to the fact that the carbon fuel carnival is over, it really will be over, as the manipulators of the Matrix play their cards. The three I cited over and over and over were false flag events, pathogen releases, and instigation of global conflict. Isn't it perplexing that even those who know their government has done nothing but lie to them about countless issues forever, including the countless false flag events that have been used to justify unbridled aggression, carnage, and chaos, aka wars, for some reason all too often choose to believe the official lies about why global conflicts are taking place and about who is actually to blame? They wave their pom-poms and claim to be patriotic by not questioning their government. Who are the ultimate powers that are most responsible for orchestrating and instigating total aggression in one form or another? Aggression that routinely labels every single casualty they create, tens of thousands or more, as, quote, enemy combatants or terrorists, even if the casualties are kids or infants. Who controls Western media in order to pump out the pitifully one-sided propaganda which is necessary if populations are to be successfully polarized and programmed and thus made compliant, even in regard to blatant crimes against humanity, which includes climate engineering, aka weather warfare, not just manipulated conflict zones? How many are hiding in their pews, blindly following the yarns of those that choose to hide behind their pulpits? Those that represent traditional institutions which are not about to step out of line lest they lose their nonprofit status. That's called control. Who occupies the top tiers of the power pyramid? Those who print the money. Of course, how could it be otherwise? Those who print the money, control the military-industrial complex and Matrix media, which covers their tracks. Ask yourself, who are you not allowed to criticize, ever, for any reason? There's the true seat of power. I sometimes receive messages from angry individuals that scold me, in their words, for being too negative and depressing. So they say they'll refuse to listen to the bad news broadcast any further. My response? The hallmark of a healthy mind is an unyielding willingness to face the truth, no matter how dire the truth may be. Yes, just another day in the orbiting asylum. The question now is, how long till impact at full velocity? It's already unfolding. Those that even now have their eyes wide shut will have their heads ripped from the sand soon. Wait and see. Let's get to some bad news breaking reports. And again, remember and consider unfolding biosphere collapse translates to total power structure desperation. Issues like the LA unrest and the Trump-Newsom feud, and so on, scripted theater, nothing more, but unfortunately all too effective at distracting the masses from the oncoming train of total ecological collapse. Distract, divide, and polarize till the moment of impact. On that note, from LifeScience.com, Earth's energy balance is rising much faster than scientists expected, and now researchers worry they might lose the means to figure out why. Ponder that one. The Life Science report continues with this. For reasons still unknown, Earth's energy imbalance is rising much faster than models can account for. Now, scientists are calling for long-term investment in monitoring capability so that they can make informed predictions about the climate. Stop. Informed predictions. Really? If the so-called climate science community had the backbone to tell the truth, to acknowledge the climate engineering weather warfare elephant in the equation, their modeling would be exponentially more accurate, wouldn't it? Life Science continues with this. Earth's energy imbalance is growing faster than anyone expected, and scientists don't understand why. Let's stop there for a moment. Geoengineering.org and my on-the-record statements for 16 years not only expected it, we stated it was happening. I stated that. I stated it's not as bad as we're being told. It's exponentially worse. How could I know from my research? And the whole of academia didn't know? They didn't know. How could they not know about climate engineering? Either criminally ignorant of the very field of expertise in which we are told to trust them, or they're lying. They continue with their report. Satellite data suggests Earth's energy imbalance has more than doubled over the past 2 decades. Most have no idea how dire that statement is. No idea. It means Earth's former energy equilibrium has been blown to bits. The report says massively exceeding the increase predicted by climate models. Scientists still aren't sure why there has been such an increase in the imbalance. Let's stop again. Anyone remember how many times over how many years that I've sounded the alarm about the rapidly rising increase in thermal energy buildup on the planet, now exceeding the thermal energy contained in 13 Hiroshima nuclear bombs per second, with climate engineering, aka weather warfare, further fueling the overall fire. And now, finally, some admission from the bought and paid for so-called climate scientists, not because they're committed to the truth, but because it is becoming all but impossible to hide the truth. The report continues with this. Earth's inflated energy imbalance is likely due to a decline in Earth's solar reflectivity. That is, the report states, the amount of energy that the planet radiates back into space. They then say something is missing from the models, but we don't really know right now what it is. Stop. Right. They just can't figure it out. They just don't know what it could be. And if the climate engineering atrocities are brought to the attention of the so-called climate scientists, the knee-jerk programmed response is belched out. Just a conspiracy theory, they say. Just grid patterns of jet exhaust in our skies, that's all. And just a coincidence that the jets dispersing are commonly on non-flight path trajectories with their tracking transponders turned off. All just coincidence. Move along, nothing to see here. Final excerpt from the Live Science Report. The publication should be titled the Non-Science Report. Regardless of why Earth's energy imbalance is growing so rapidly, the implications are alarming. That's a gross understatement. They are beyond catastrophic. They continue, the larger the imbalance is, the faster climate change happens. If we have more imbalances, they say, that means more energy accumulation. Temperatures rise faster. Stop. Wow. Really? Certainly it takes a team of so-called scientists to figure that one out. Translation, if it gets hotter, it's going to get hotter. Who would have imagined that? And it took a team of climate engineering denying scientists to tell us that. Again, though climate engineering is the most destructive and damaging human activity of all, it is by no means the only source of damage to the planet in this equation. The list is endless. Those who cling to the "it's just climate engineering damaging the planet" false narrative are every bit as off base and incorrect as those who claim climate engineering is just a proposal. Stand on verifiable facts, not ideology, preconception, and bias. Standing on credible facts is how we prevail in this grand game of chess. That's how we move the fight forward. So how hot is it going to get? How many really want to know? Heat index temperatures are going even further off the charts in many parts of the world that are not being bombarded with chemical ice nucleation elements, aka chemical cool downs. Remember the blizzard in New Orleans in Florida while it was above freezing and raining in much of the polar regions that was never reported? The chemical cool downs by the world's largest military, the eastern half of the U.S. lower 48 states, is the most chemically cooled region on the planet. For the record, at least so far. The heat index, also known as the apparent temperature, focuses on how hot it feels due to a combination of air temperature and humidity. it doesn't factor in the intensity of ultraviolet radiation from the sun. What's that mean? Translation: it means the planetary meltdown is far worse than any official source is disclosing. If you want to know the actual heat index in your location, take the high temperature reading there with your own equipment, measure the humidity with your own gauges, search the heat index calculator online, plug in the two values, and you'll have it. Heat indexes in the northern hemisphere have already gone north of 150 degrees, and it isn't even summer yet. This summer will be like no other. You can quote me on that. Heat indexes are routinely being underreported, as are official daily high temperatures and nightly low temperatures. They're being radically underreported. Nighttime low temperatures globally on average are rising twice as fast as daytime highs. Why? Because we are thickening the atmosphere with heat-trapping gases and trapping heat with climate engineering elements that not only reflect heat up, they reflect it back down. Climate engineering is also disabling the planet's ability to respond to the other sources of damage done. The planet's encased in a toxic geoengineering straitjacket. If we don't release it from that, we're done. That's simple. From YaleClimateConnections.org, author Jeff Masters. Remember that name. He might need an email with a link to the dimming. That would be appropriate, wouldn't it? Here's the Yale headline: expect a long summer of wildfire smoke for North America. Report says fire danger is increasing as the climate warms, drying out forests. Let's stop right there. Firestorm danger is increasing exponentially, primarily due to climate engineering weather warfare operations. Again, this is not a denial of the damage done by the 2-century-long carbon fuel carnival. It's simply to state a fact. The intentional disruption of the global hydrological cycle by dumping tens of millions of tons of toxic and flammable nanoparticles into the atmosphere annually is by far the biggest piece of the unstoppable firestorm puzzle. Please search the Engineering Wildfire section on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org and specifically search and view one of our most important reports on the subject: Wildfires Serve Geoengineering Agenda. And remember, a rapidly warming planet must produce more overall rain. The laws of physics make this clear. Atmosphere holds 7% more moisture for every degree C of warming. If that's not happening, there's a factor we're not being told about, and that factor is climate engineering. It's also decreasing global cloud cover, again, which I talked about earlier. That's the loss of the planet's albedo, its reflectivity. If that continues, game over. Climate engineering's stated purpose is to increase the planet's albedo, not diminish it. It's having exactly the opposite effect overall, and that's what happens when you use the planet's life support systems as a covert weapon of war. You destroy those systems. That's exactly what's happening, in addition to contaminating every single breath we take. Everything contaminated everywhere, ubiquitously, every drop of rain on planet Earth, everything. Back to the Yale report. Again, expect a long summer of wildfire smoke for North America. The report states horrific summer wildfires are once again ravaging large swaths of Canada's vast forests, sending frequent plumes of unhealthy smoke deep into the United States. And that smoke is held down in the ground by ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure zones, parking that smoke on the ground. They continue. The long-range forecast calls for above-average fire risk over much of the forested areas of Western Canada and the Western U.S. this summer. Get ready for it on the U.S. West Coast. They're prepping it now. Already starting to happen on the Columbia River Gorge. More will come. Bet on it. This summer, the report says, and we should anticipate frequent bouts of poor air quality from wildfire smoke across much of North America. Portions of 5 states experienced 24-hour levels of PM 2.5 in the, quote, unhealthy red range, with even higher levels in the purple, very unhealthy range. Were measured on an hourly basis according to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. At the red unhealthy level, everyone may begin to experience health effects, and members of sensitive groups may experience more serious health effects. Again, author Jeff Masters, former National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration climate cover-up actor. So, what did Jeff Masters neglect to mention? What do all official air testing agencies neglect even to look for, let alone report? The tens of millions of tons of nanoparticles being cloaked by the smoke banks and the so-called Sahara dust storms, both of which have climate engineering toxic aerosol spraying operations raging above them. Geoengineeringwatch.org recorded over the Paradise Fire blanket aerosol spraying right above the smoke bank. Whatever that's about, it is not benevolent. That is something very malevolent going on. And when these agencies that test our air don't even look for anything below 2.5 microns, how can they possibly tell you how many nanoparticles are in the air? They can't. And that's the point. The system is designed not to disclose this mountain of contamination. The current air quality testing is comparable to trying to catch a minnow in a tuna net. You cannot do it. And the smaller the particle, the more toxic and damaging they are. Keep that in mind for every breath you take. This is Dane Wigington. You're listening to the weekly installment of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Report, the end of the world as we know it broadcast, brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of global climate engineering operations, aka weather warfare. Got a very nasty comment from someone who claimed that I claimed we had the largest website in the world. No, never said that. Why would I say that? What I have always stated accurately is that Geoengineeringwatch.org is the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of covert climate engineering operations. We stand on credible ground here. That's how we move this fight forward. Share credible data from a credible source. The weather terrorists continue to block and divert any chance of precipitation for the U.S. West Coast. The western U.S. firestorm preparation continues. We're not even to summer yet. And everything is positioned to incinerate with blinding speed. Again, about the firestorms, the source of ignition is a secondary subject. Keep that in mind. The primary point is this: climate engineering operations are setting the template for the infernos. From theecologist.org, climate capitalism won't save us. Needed to point this one out. They say to assume green capitalism is more progressive than its carbon fuel opposition would be a critical mistake. Yes, it would. It absolutely would. At best, alternative forms of energy are a carbon fuel extender. They are not a panacea. Please take the time to view Planet of the Humans if you want to know just how non-renewable, so-called renewable energy is. I'm off the grid, have been for almost 25 years, solar, wind, and hydro. The wind and the hydro don't really work much anymore because geoengineering has totally derailed the hydrological cycle, and it has completely altered convection, which alters surface wind speeds. It's either all or nothing wind now, neither of which works for a wind turbine. And about the solar panels, again, stop and think how ludicrous it is for the so-called green community to push solar panels while they're ignoring the fact that climate engineering is blocking direct sunlight, which renders solar panels completely dysfunctional. And almost forgot to mention, there's that pesky detail of the near functional collapse of the ozone layer, which allows so much thermal energy, penetrating energy, to hit the solar panels, it superheats them, and that radically lowers their output. And when I say radically, that means sometimes 30, 40%. And that's directly related to climate engineering. Climate engineering is the single greatest factor destroying the ozone layer. None of this acknowledged by the so-called green community that wants us to put solar panels everywhere, while climate engineering is doing everything imaginable to render that technology dysfunctional. From carbonbrief.org, how human-caused aerosols are masking global warming. This is a covert way of selling climate engineering, and the short-term toxic cooldowns the aerosols can create come at the cost of a worsened overall planetary meltdown for reasons I just described. Destroying the ozone layer, disrupting the hydrological cycle, and trapping more heat than they defect. But nevertheless, sources like Carbon Brief wants to covertly try to sell climate engineering. Here's how they do it from the report. Human-caused emissions of aerosols, tiny light-scattering particles, exactly what solar radiation management calls for, produced mainly by, they say, burning carbon fuels, which is false. The majority of nanoparticles in the atmosphere are from climate engineering. Not downplaying industrialized pollution, but nanoparticles, the majority are coming from climate engineering operations, 40 to 60 million tons a year. They say these aerosols have long since acted as an invisible brake on global warming. It's not working so well, is it, as the planet circles the drain into total meltdown? They say this is largely because they absorb or reflect incoming sunlight, just stated that about the dysfunctional solar panels, and influence the formation and brightness of clouds. They're diminishing natural cloud cover. How about that? If it's working so well, how about the report I just covered in the beginning of this broadcast stating the planet's albedo is diminishing, its reflectivity is diminishing, not increasing. These combined effects, the Carbon Brief article states, act to lower regional and global temperatures. No, short-term toxic surface cool downs at the cost of a worse overall planetary meltdown. But consider that they paint the picture that if we want to keep the planet from continuing to accelerate into total meltdown, even more atmospheric pollution is needed. So they want us to believe, covertly selling climate engineering. Aerosols also have a substantial impact, they say, on human health. Already brought that up, with poor outdoor air quality from particulate matter contributing to millions of premature deaths per year. No, not millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions. No way to correctly calculate that because so much effort goes into trying to hide that. From the World Resources Institute, fires drove record-breaking tropical forest loss in 2024. How many people know that? It's not just Canadian forests burning up. Fires burned 5 times more tropical primary forest in 2024 than 2023. Think about that. 5 times more. This report was packed with comprehensive data, worth looking up, worth examining, yet, not surprisingly, a complete omission of the biggest puzzle piece of all: global climate engineering operations, the largest core factor for forest burn downs, not mentioned. Many more bad news breaking reports in a moment. But first, on the subject of helping to hide the climate engineering operations in plain sight while pretending to tell the truth, a very large online platform recently, I believe a platform with over 4 million subscribers, that claims to be objective investigators, that claims to be committed to telling the truth, in the case of climate engineering operations, are actually disseminating disinformation, propagating the just condensation in our skies narrative. At the same time, this very large and well-known platform provided a voice to an individual who's personally invested in denying global geoengineering operations while simultaneously promoting a cloud seeding company of which he is the 25-year-old CEO. The company name is Rainmaker. This individual claimed his company can change the weather, but implied governments around the world can't or aren't. Does that really sound plausible? This very large online platform further did their best not to tell the truth by pretending that localized weather modification operations are climate engineering. They are not. The two aren't even remotely comparable. Ant to an elephant. By pretending that localized weather modification operations are benign and beneficial. They are neither. Pretending by total omission that unfolding and accelerating biosphere collapse isn't actually happening, isn't sealing our collective fate with each passing day, while denying the geoengineering jet tanker weather warfare operations raging in our skies non-stop, which geoengineeringwatch.org has conclusively proven with atmospheric sampling and testing. If you're willing to examine a sample of this proof, please view the just posted Geoengineering Watch short 90-second video titled Climate Engineering Nanoparticles in Our Atmosphere, Lab Testing Confirms. 2 months ago, I was contacted by the producer for this same large online platform that has chosen to cover the tracks of the climate engineers. Their producer and I had an extensive discussion about climate engineering operations and the extremely near-term existential threat they posed to us all due to climate disruption and the ubiquitous contamination of the entire planet by the climate engineering fallout. But it seems the factually verifiable truth wasn't acceptable to this platform. So, again, they opted to confuse their followers with a lengthy exchange focused on small-scale localized cloud seeding operations being pushed by an individual that stands to personally profit from the 2-hour-long infomercial, which is what this exchange amounted to, that he uses to promote the cloud seeding business, again called Rainmaker, which, again, he is the CEO of. Mind-numbing disinformation. A 25-year-old CEO pretending he can produce rain for the world while denying the total disruption of the entire global hydrological cycle by raging global climate engineering operations being covertly conducted in plain sight by governments around the world. Operations that are mathematically, literally millions of times larger than his minuscule operation. A single propeller-driven private cloud-seeding aircraft may disperse a few pounds of toxic elements into our skies. A single geoengineering jet aircraft, like a KC-135, can dump 100 tons of toxic materials in a single payload. Geoengineeringwatch.org has worked with sources like UC Minnesota, utilizing hundreds of precipitation tests to determine that the total global geoengineering dispersion of atmospheric nanoparticles annually is likely in the range of 40 to 60 million tons. And the CEO of Rainmaker believes the meager amount of material his few propeller-driven planes has any meaning whatsoever in this equation. For the record, the same cloud seeding company CEO showed up at many of the hearings for state legislation attempting to ban climate engineering operations. And this CEO did his best to derail those efforts. It's in his own self-interest, isn't it? At least in his mind. In addition to everything already mentioned, the 25-year-old CEO of the Rainmaker company seemed very determined that the listeners knew he was a Christian. Very much pushed that point, while pushing his own toxic efforts to derail the natural life support systems of creation. Do those two puzzle pieces really fit together? Is he claiming to be a Christian to increase his marketing appeal while denying the climate engineering operations raging in our skies? You decide. But this question remains. Why would a very large online platform, again about 4 million followers I believe, that claims to care about the truth, do their best to play their part in the cover-up of climate engineering operations? A 2-hour disinformation infomercial filled with ads of every kind, ads that, for example, push people to purchase shiny metals that the ads say will protect them from what's coming. Really? Shiny metals will protect us from a dead planet? Good luck with that. Moving on, back to the cold hard truth, again all too often masked by disinformation. Here's another case in point from MSN. Scientists show reforestation helps cool the planet even more than thought. They say replanting forests can help cool the planet even more than some scientists once believed, especially in the tropics. That's according to a recent announcement by the University of California, Riverside. Bob Allen, a professor of climatology at the University of California, Riverside, and the paper's lead author, said in a news release, it's a powerful strategy. Really, Bob. Only one problem. The trees no longer grow. You can't restart a forest with conditions like they are now. I know that firsthand. And that has been admitted by other science studies. So you can pretend that if you could magically plant trees that magically grew on a dying forest with incredibly harsh conditions that no longer allow for that growth, then it would magically fix the planet. Scientists that were taught, told, trained, programmed to blindly believe are anything but credible, anything but truthful. It's not just in this arena. Medical industrial complex as well. How many learn that the hard way? So about reforesting, it's not happening. For the record, over 66% of the trees that were here before the dawn of civilization are gone. The remaining third is dead and dying. That doesn't bode well for the fate of the human race. These forests are not coming back in any time frame that matters. Just a lot of false claims by the so-called climate science community designed to pacify the population until the moment of impact, making them believe that someone somewhere has a magic solution and we'll all live happily ever after. There's more. Part truth, the rest a massive lie of omission. From ecowatch.com. CO2 acts like a blanket, trapping heat and warming the lower atmosphere. This changes weather patterns and fuels extreme events such as heat waves, droughts, and wildfires, as well as heavier precipitation and flooding. Is CO2 a problem? Yes. Is doubling atmospheric CO2 in the geologic blink of an eye a problem? Absolutely. It triggers other gases like methane and nitrous oxide. Methane, by the way, about 6 or 7 times higher in the atmosphere now that it's been for millions of years. That is definitely a problem. I'm not talking about calflatulence. I'm talking about methane hydrate and clathrate fields releasing. Search Siberian methane craters if you want to see visual footage of that. Very shocking. Looks like nuclear bomb craters. It's happening on the seafloor as well. All of this is a problem. But in regard to the earth changes, the whiplash type changes that we are seeing, single greatest factor there, these radical day-to-day changes, that's climate engineering. Climate engineering is the single greatest hydrological disrupting factor of all, period. Heat waves, The worst of them are made exponentially more dire by ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat domes. None of this mentioned here from the so-called scientists. Look here, don't look there. And the whole of so-called academia pretending that climate engineering isn't raging in our skies. How long will that continue? How long will the public allow it to continue? That's my question. From the UK Guardian. Ticking time bomb. Sea acidity has reached critical levels, threatening entire ecosystems. Study acknowledges. Follow me through with this because this is a vindication for what I've stated on the record for over 2 decades. Ocean acidification has already crossed a crucial threshold. Wait a minute. I thought we might cross that someday. Now they're saying, no, it's crossed. Threshold for planetary health. Scientists say an unexpected finding. The world's oceans are in worse health than we realize. Scientists have just disclosed as they warn that a key measurement shows we are running out of time to protect marine ecosystems. It's done. It's done. You cannot just shut it off. Thelma and Louise moment. Same is true with the oceans. They're spiraling toward Canfield Ocean, and that is dire beyond understanding. They continue. Ocean acidification, often called the evil twin of the climate risk, is caused when carbon dioxide is rapidly absorbed by the ocean, where it reacts with water molecules. That's all true, leading to a fall in the pH level of the seawater. It damages coral reefs and under ocean habitats, and in extreme cases can dissolve the shells of marine creatures. Already happening. So when you hear people say forests are dying because there's not enough CO2, stop and plug some reason into that equation. First, what about the oceans that are definitely directly dying because of the CO2? But on the forests, if they were thriving, and they were before the dawn of civilization, and we have pumped up the CO2 by 50% since then, and forests all over the world are dying or dead, how can that possibly be a lack of CO2 as the problem? Climate engineering, single greatest causal factor for forest die-off and now ocean heating. And that's saying a lot because the burning of carbon fuel, 100 million barrels of hydrocarbon a day, 26 million tons of coal a day, that is a massive problem. But climate engineering destroying the planet's protective layers, starting with the ozone layer, now allowing intense UV radiation to bombard the planet, that's even worse. We are truly in a dark place. The report says until now, ocean acidification had not been deemed to have crossed the planetary boundary. Planetary boundaries are the natural limits of key global systems such as climate, water, and wildlife diversity, beyond which their ability to maintain a healthy planet is in danger of failing. 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries have already been crossed. No, not true. All 9 have been crossed. They say, however, a new study by the UK's Plymouth Marine Laboratory has stated that we crossed the ocean acidification boundary about 5 years ago. Also not true. Likely about 20 years ago. But what's the difference? It's crossed. They say ocean acidification isn't just an environmental crisis, it's a ticking time bomb for marine ecosystems and coastal economies. Everything in the ocean is dying. It's superheating, ozone layer and UV radiation, lack of ozone layer, killing plankton. We've treated the oceans as a toxic waste dump. Everything from nuclear to sewage. Is it any wonder everything's dying? The report says the deeper in the ocean they looked, the worse the findings were. The scientists said at 2,000 meters below the surface, 60% of global waters had breached the safe limit. There's no safe limit for something that's bad. That's like when they tell you there's a safe limit for some sort of toxic element in our environment. There's no safe limit. It's just different degrees of bad. The report says we are coming to terms with an existential threat. Where have I heard that before? While grappling with the difficult reality that much suitable habitat for key species has already been lost. Yeah, about 500 plus dead zones around the world, some as big as 10,000 square miles. In summary, Earth's oceans and everything in them are dying. More headlines, same theme. From ITV.com, entire ocean ecosystems threatened by acidification. Research now shows safe level was breached 5 years ago. Just went over that. From numerous other sources, ocean acidification crosses planetary boundary. From Le Monde.fr, listen to this. Storing more carbon in the ocean. The wild gamble of marine geoengineering. It's already been going on. It's called ocean fertilization. That's one of the reasons the oceans are so packed with carbon. Because the climate engineers have forced them to uptake that carbon by what they're dumping in the skies over the oceans that settles down to the sea surface, that spawns blooms of algae that absorb CO2. Kills that section of ocean, but hey, who cares? It hides the CO2. That's what they want for the moment. This report says, as experts and businesses look for ways to rid the Earth's atmosphere of CO2, they're trying to increase the ocean's capacity to absorb carbon. What a great idea. Oceans are already dying by the day because they're so acidic, or they're heading toward acidity. They're still alkaline, but of course they're becoming more acidic. Same problem. And yet here we have the disaster capitalists trying to push their new methods of forcing even more CO2 uptake in the oceans. What a great idea. It shows the insanity of our species, doesn't it? From every conceivable direction. It's truly like an asylum when you watch the Matrix Media commercials and the way people behave everywhere with no apparent clue whatsoever that light they see at the end of the tunnel is definitely an oncoming train. No clue. Almost none have any clue. That is so profoundly disturbing to live on such a planet. From sfgate.com, marine heat as the new normal. What's behind the ocean's unprecedented warming? Question mark. Gee, I can't imagine. It couldn't be burning again. 100 million barrels of carbon fuel a day, 26 million tons of coal, geoengineering, destroying the ozone layer, UV radiation. You know the whole story. What could be wrong? Question mark. The scientists just can't figure it out. Asylum. Next from the UK Guardian, total control or cover-up of climate engineering. 8 U.S. states seek to outlaw, quote, chemtrails, even though they aren't real. That's what the Guardian states. They say states introduce chemtrail-coded legislation as conspiracy theories take root in some U.S. chambers. This is the epitome of transparent desperation on the part of Matrix Media. And they use the chemtrails term a lot. Why? Because that's the instant marginalization term. You don't see them referring to solar radiation management, stratospheric aerosol injection, cloud albedo enhancement, so on and so forth. No, chemtrails, chemtrails, chemtrails. And too many in the, quote, activist community want also to rely on this term. I'll get to that. This report states the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency states that the plumes of aircraft exhaust vapor are natural results of flight and pose no weather risk patterns. Really, how about the health risks as well? We're not guessing. Lab tests are completely conclusive and have been for decades. Toxic heavy metals, polymers, the list goes on. But there you have it. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to see here because official sources say so. Again, for the record, those that are truly committed to prevailing in the all-important cause of exposing and halting climate engineering, aka weather warfare, will stick to the science terms and will stick to the verifiable lab testing and data proven facts of the matter. Credible data from a credible source. That's how we win the chess game. Matrix Media insists again the public continue to use the chemtrails term. That should tell you something. The chemtrails term harms the cause. Fine for private conversations, but that's it. You're listening to the weekly installment of Global Alert News, the Bad News Broadcast, installment number 514, June 14th, 2025. This is Dane Wigington, your host. Global Alert News is brought to you by Geoengineeringwatch.org, the largest and most visited website in the world on the subject of climate intervention operations, known as geoengineering. Global Alert News is now aired on numerous AM and FM stations around the country. We pay for this out of pocket, by the way. We don't have any ads. We don't have any sponsors. All paid for out of pocket. I'm here for the cause, nothing more. It has always been so. If any radio station near you is willing to air the GAN broadcast in order to inform their listeners of what Matrix Media won't mention, have them contact us at admin@geoengineeringwatch.org. We will grant them access to our weekly broadcast for free, of course. Recordings of the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour broadcast can be found on the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org under the recent column and on the Dane Wigington YouTube channel. If you're on our email list, please put us on your email contact book so that our mailouts don't go to the spam files. Please help us to share the groundbreaking documentary, The Dimming. This is the best tool we have in this battle, which fully exposes the climate engineering atrocities. Best way to share. circulate the direct link to the dimming for free, of course, by email directly from the homepage of geoengineeringwatch.org. Sharing directly helps us to overcome social media censorship when viewing our YouTube of the dimming or Global Alert News or any other Geoengineering Watch video on YouTube. Please subscribe, share, and comment, all of which helps us to circulate critically important data to a much wider audience. About reaching those that still aren't looking up. Start a conversation with Geoengineering Watch awareness-raising materials, which can be found on our homepage. Our only goal, again, provide activists what they need to move this fight forward. Extremely high-quality printed materials, shocking images, pictures worth 1,000 words. We pass these printed materials on for less than our cost of producing and shipping. Please help us to sound the alarm. We have new Geoengineering Watch hoodies, new Geoengineering Watch shirts, including blue shirts. Photos are now on our homepage. We have scannable business cards. Everybody takes those. They can go straight to the dimming with that scannable business cards. Very striking images on it. Very effective. Bumper stickers, all effective tools to help strike up a conversation on the climate engineering issue. Reaching a critical mass. Only way forward in this fight. Please keep that in mind. We can only stop it from the inside out when those participating are military brothers and sisters, defense industry families, and individuals, when they know they're truly eliminating any chance for themselves and their posterity. Let us hope that they find their sense of reason and courage and stand down. If you're willing to share a picture of yourself with a Geoengineering Watch t-shirt or hoodie, hopefully in some crowded location, please send your photo to us and we can post it as part of our activist compilation. That's now part of our materials page. The images help encourage others to make their voices heard while it can still make a difference. As always, to those that are steadfastly committed to exposing and halting the climate engineering onslaught, my deepest, most profound gratitude to you, now and always. Moving on from thedailyhood.com, U.S. Treasury abruptly buys $10 billion of its own debt in massive historic Treasury buyback. Why is that important? What's it have to do with climate engineering? A lot, because everything's connected. This is the epitome of the snake eating its own tail, printing money from thin air and buying its own debt. And the bottom line to economic everything is ecological everything. No functional environment, no economy, no civilization, no humans, simple. When you see a red flag like this, a $10 billion quantitative easing, snake eating its own tail, last act of financial desperation, you know the end is near. Bet on it. Moving on. So remember in the beginning of this broadcast when I mentioned the completely delusional science report that tried to push the false notion that we can plant trees everywhere and we'll live magically happily ever after? Let's add this. From ScienceAlert.com, scientists studying Earth's trees issued a stark warning to humanity. The loss of these species isn't just a blow to local forest, it threatens entire ecosystems, just like the ocean acidifying and killing everything and superheating. They say research shows this conclusion. 1/3 of all tree species are on the brink of extinction, totaling around 17,500 endangered tree species. Some tree species are so rare that only a single known individual specimen remains. Think about that. We're losing 200 to 300 species of plant, animal, and insect every single day. For those that think that's normal, no, it's not. It's 15,000 times the background rate. That's 1.5 million% of normal. That's called the most abrupt mass extinction in the planet's history right now, and we're neck deep in it. And people are going about their lives as if none of this is going on and caught up in scripted political idiocy. Political theater, all sides of the political fence, caught up in it. Report says most of our fruit comes from trees, and so do many nuts and medicines. Trees are interwoven in our soil, atmosphere, and weather too, cleaning our air, producing oxygen, and making it rain. They store 3/4 of the world's accessible fresh water. Think about that. They did store 3/4 of the world's accessible fresh water, no more. And more than half of its problematic carbon dioxide, no more. That's all in the past. The trees are dying so fast you can't keep track of where there are huge areas of forest flashing out near me as well. Forests don't smell like forests because the trees have shut their stomata, because the atmospheric conditions are so harsh. They're not breathing, they're not absorbing carbon, they're not releasing oxygen. Atmospheric oxygen content is plummeting. Yes, this is all happening right now, and no, hiding your head in the sand won't save us. Only fully facing this issue will save us. It's not a courageous act to run and hide. Facing the storm, in spite of your fears, that's where solace lies. From MSN, U.S. farmers stunned as scorching heat devastates key crop. This has never happened to us. That's the headline. Farmers across the valley are reporting lower than usual harvests for cherries and other fruits. The sweltering heat appears to be the blame. It's also the UV. It's also the toxic rain. It's not just a this or that equation. It's all the above. A long drought has cost corn farmers in North Carolina hundreds of millions of dollars in crops. The heat waves in India are drastically raising the prices of staple vegetables. Meanwhile, a sudden cold snap has wiped out food across Ukraine. Welcome to chemical ice nucleation operations. Again, search the engineering winter section. None of this is normal. What does it take to wake people up and get them to look away from their electrical appendage and look at the sky? Also, they say heavy rainfall in Spain is making pollination nearly impossible. Pollination, if you can find a bee, because they're about 95% collapsed right now. 95? Where's the red flag alarm on that? No, we're just watching political theater. From MSN, why Lake Mead's decline is a national crisis. This report says there's no sugarcoating it. Climate change is supercharging the Southwest water woes. No, the biggest cause is climate engineering. When I moved here in Northern California, based on all available science data at the time, in 1995, the IPCC manual, largest scientific panel on any subject ever created in human history, based on the continued warming of the planet, the greatest increase in precipitation in the whole lower 48 should have been right where I live in Northern California. That is not taking into account climate engineering, which they didn't take into account, and climate engineering has changed all of that. Think about this. Project Popeye, Vietnam, the 60s, the U.S. military, so effective at manipulating precipitation that international treaties were passed in the 70s, not that anybody pays any attention to that. Of course they can control the spigot. And yet we have the whole of the climate science community pretending that this is just the result of planetary warming. Am I saying planetary warming isn't happening? No, I'm not saying that. Never said that. Am I saying burning incomprehensible amounts of carbon fuel, hydrocarbon, coal, that's not a problem? I'm not saying that. It's a massive problem. Climate engineering on top of all that, death sentence. That's what I'm saying. Keep in mind, climate engineers control the spigot. Where it rains, how much it rains, and how toxic that rain will be. And it is the climate engineers doing this. It's not the CEO of Rainmaker Corporation. Keep that in mind. From the UK Guardian, drought fears in Europe amid reports May was the world's second hottest ever. That report's false. Hottest ever. And the only thing skewing that data are the temporary toxic chemical cooldowns, much like the, again, New Orleans snowstorms and Florida snowstorms. They skew the data. When they chemically cool an area, they take hundreds of low temperature readings from a geographic area, which if it's record hot, they might take a dozen. That's how they skew the data. The planet's getting warmer and warmer and warmer. Climate engineering being used to skew that data until the moment of impact. From news.portugal.com, huge hailstones in the north of Portugal. Again, welcome to chemical ice nucleating operations, patented processes. Look at all that data, engineering winter section, geoengineeringwatch.org. From farioja.com, I'm not going to pronounce that. Spectacular hailstorms leave Spain white. Never had this historically. Now it's everywhere all the time. From extremetemps.com, extraordinary heat, record heat from Africa to Europe to Asia. Americans in the eastern half of the U.S. might not know that, would they? Since the climate engineers are manipulating moisture off the record warm Gulf of Mexico in the unorganized fashion over the whole eastern U.S. and nucleating it everywhere, flash cooling them down. People in the eastern half of the U.S. don't have any idea what's happening around the world. From IraqNews.com, Iraq braces for first summer heat wave starting Friday. Temperatures to hit 125 degrees Fahrenheit. That's higher than Death Valley. Think about that. Ionosphere heater-induced high-pressure heat dome. Iraq's been bearing the brunt, and Iran, both bearing the brunt of Western military weather warfare for decades. Gee, I wonder why they don't like us. From caliber.az, record-breaking heat wave triggers 17-fold increase in Greenland ice melting. From that report, unseasonably high temperatures struck Iceland and Greenland during May. Weather stations across both countries recording extreme heat 17 times more than normal. 1,700% more than normal. Gee, I wonder if there's a problem. If you live in Miami, Florida, for example, you might want to sell that coastal real estate fast. It's not going to be worth anything soon. Wait and see. From the UK Guardian, Kabul at risk of becoming first modern city to run out of water, report warns. Again, climate engineers can cut the precipitation off upstream to anyone they want and bring them to their knees. That's exactly what's happening. Must rain more overall on a warming planet. If it's not, there's a factor we're not being told about. And again, climate engineering, hallmark of climate engineering, devastating drought and deadly deluge scenarios, hallmark of climate engineering operations. From BBC, wind farms stalling natural wind currents, wind theft, mysterious effect plaguing wind farms. I wonder what that could be. Mysterious effect. Climate engineering is radically affecting convection, atmospheric pressure zones, thus surface wind speeds. Now we have all or nothing scenarios, which renders wind farms useless. From ABC News, why scientists are concerned over the record amount of seaweed in the Caribbean. Sargassum, something in the range of 50 million tons, washing up everywhere, sign of dying oceans around the globe. It's coming. New from Axios.com, birds in Florida and nationwide are vanishing fast. That's the report. That's their words. Of course they are. When the insects die, the birds die. Everything across the board is dying. People going about their life watching political theater. Not for much longer. From MSN.com, Earth's atmosphere hasn't had this much CO2 in it for millions of years, and perhaps tens of millions of years. Again, yes, CO2 is a problem. Yes, it's necessary for life, so is water. Put your head a foot under. See how long you live. Balance, equilibrium. That's what it's about. Everything's a part of the problem when you use climate engineering on top of all the rest of the damage done. Death sentence. Another from MSN. Starlink satellites might burn up the ozone layer. Of course they are. Every rocket launch tears a gaping hole in the ozone, what's left of the ozone layer, because climate engineering is destroying it ubiquitously all over the world. And they say that this harming of the ozone layer is affecting crop yield and marine life. Where have I heard that before? Finally admitting to what geoengineeringwatch.org has stated on the record for so incredibly long. They say the UV rays will hammer farmlands, damaging plants, reducing crop yields, and disrupting global food production. In other words, your grocery bill could might skyrocket. You'll be lucky to find groceries. Search the ozone destruction section on geoengineeringwatch.org and listen to a few of those exchanges myself with what is probably the world's foremost ozone metering individual, now deceased. Listen to that. That'll sober you up. From thenation.com, sleepwalking through the climate emergency. A shrewd observer of authoritarianism warns against normalizing what should shock us. That's true. That headline is true. But how about thenation.com acknowledging climate engineering? How about that? Let's consider the following from the collapse of industrialized civilization. The relationship between human extinction, biosphere collapse, and industrial civilization is best understood not as a simple linear chain of cause and effect, but as a deeply recursive and mutually reinforcing feedback loop. Industrial civilization, with its technological prowess and relentless pursuit of economic growth, has fundamentally destabilized the biosphere, the intricate web of life and planetary systems that make human existence possible in the first place. The human race is already functionally extinct if we remain on the current course. This is extremely near-term, omnicide. When I hear the terms alarmism and fear-mongering from some who apparently don't have a clue or don't want you to have a clue, at what point do you become alarmed or concerned? When the planet becomes a true sister to Venus, or sometime before that, when we might actually still do some good, when we might actually salvage some part of the planet's remaining life support system so that someone might make it through what's coming? When family and so-called friends try their best to ridicule you and marginalize you for summoning the courage to share dire data and truths, consider the timeless words of Greek philosopher Pythagoras from some 2,500 years ago. Rest satisfied with doing well and leave others to talk of you as they please. The only possession any of us can ever truly call our own is our God-given will, the correct and honorable use of it. That has been entrusted to each of us alone to protect and preserve at all cost. Always remember what matters and what not, what is in your control and what not. Focus on what is. Focus on what facts and reason would dictate as being right and true. And at the end of your journey, you will never regret the path you have chosen. You can face your Maker and not turn away in shame. Collapse should have happened many years ago, but it didn't. Why not? One primary reason, the propensity of the majority to keep their eyes wide shut until the moment of impact. At face value, we have no chance. Almost no one, almost none, have even the most distant fundamental understanding of what is unfolding by the day. We are all now knee-deep on the deck of the Titanic. The few that are aware are sounding the alarm at the top of their lungs, while the majority of the passengers prefer to wade through the rising sea of insanity and pretend that nothing is wrong, to pretend that everything will magically work out without any effort whatsoever on their part. Question, how's that strategy or lack of it working out so far? In the face of existential crisis, the mind runs, hides, and distracts itself from existential truth. Too many rely on feeling rather than fact and privilege emotional memories over verifiable reality. Question, why are Western cultures so terrified at the thought of their own mortality? Because they have been trained, taught, and programmed to be so from birth. A frightened population is far easier to control than a fearless population. Keep that in mind. Choose at your very core to be one of the fearless, one of the undaunted, one of the unyielding. Stand your ground against the gathering storm. Arm yourself with credible data from a credible source. Make your voice heard while it can still make a difference. Until next week, this is Dane Wigington from Geoengineeringwatch.org.